Freddie, how do you feel about your tight end room going into fall?
I think if you look at it on the surface, there's not a lot of returning production from last year. And so I am cautiously optimistic that we have guys that have the traits that we're looking for in a tight end, the skills, as blockers, as route runners and pass catchers. And so I am cautiously optimistic that they will make a name for themselves this season.
How does the tight end responsibility change and fold your responsibility change with this offense?
The main difference is that we probably don't use the tight ends as much in a traditional tight end role like we did, in our previous offense. I think the days of lining up with 3 tight ends, 2 attached on each side, 1 in the wing, is not going to be as frequent as we had last year. But I don't think that the days of having 2 and 3 tight ends on the field in different alignments is over.
Kyle said that Lander's obviously going to be getting looks at tight end. How enticing is that for you?
Well, if I'm going to be completely honest, I've always coveted Lander as a tight end since he was in high school. I know his brother Cody had a big influence on him. He's always wanted to play linebacker, but he was so productive in high school as a tight end and slot receiver that it's a natural now in this day and age where more players are getting an opportunity to play on both sides of the ball to utilize his talent as a tight end. It won't be, an every down package, but we will have opportunities where he comes in as one of the tight ends and we'll have some specific plays that we want him to run. And, he's such a good athlete and he's such a high football IQ guy that he catches on to things really quickly. And I think this offense will help him because it's just a little bit more plug and play with how it's structured and not as much memorization. So it'll help him to fill into that role with not a huge growth curve.
With Lander and then Otto Tia making the move, you also moved J.J. Buchanan to the tight end room. What does that say about sort of the utilization of your room? You kind of hinted at it there that you still think it's going to be a pretty prominent thing in the offense.
Yeah, I do. I think that there, will be, an opportunity to use what's traditionally called a flex tight end. And, JJ fills that bill. He's up to 225 pounds, so he's becoming more of a tight end body. Hasn't lost any of his speed, any of his explosiveness. I'm not even going to tell you his vertical jump. We'll let that be a surprise. But, very excited. He came in June, had a great summer. Excited to see him get some reps and see what he can do. And I think that also I would expect him to be a big-time special teams contributor because he's got that long body. He's an athlete, and so there's a number of different positions we could put him on the special teams units.
Hunter Andrews had a great spring. What do you see from him that can allow him to kind of take that into this fall?
Hunter's another really high football IQ guy and a guy that really is dedicated to perfecting what he does day in and day out. And Hunter is a versatile guy. He's got an opportunity to line up in a lot of different positions and do some different things. We're not going to give it away what those are, but he's got a lot of opportunity to be on the field and be touching the football and making stuff happen there. The thing about Hunter also is he's such a diligent blocker too. When he's in there, you can do a lot of stuff with him in the run game as a blocker as well.
What kind of growth have you seen from Dallin Bentley from last season to now?
Dallin had a phenomenal spring, and he was one of the leaders in the summer training and the conditioning and the things that we were doing in the summer. And what just needs to translate is the way he was playing in the spring needs to show up on the field. I think he'll have more opportunities for production this season. He didn't have very many catches last year, obviously, in the throw game, but he also didn't have very many targets. Brant Keithy was the first read in so many of the throws that were going to the tight ends that now he'll have an opportunity, I believe, to show what type of production he can have in the throw game.
You have a lot of tight ends in the NFL. Has that become an easier sell when you bring somebody in from a different position group to utilize them and even in recruiting as well?
I think so, yeah. I think that the success that they've been able to have, and we have made some changes, to some guys' position that ended up at tight end and getting, starting, getting a lot of reps and things like that. And then also in recruiting, high school and junior college prospects, when they see that's their dream, that's their goal for all of them. They all have a dream of playing in the NFL. And if you can show that you've had success doing that, then that really does increase, what you have to offer, to a recruit. Now, there's a lot of other things that come into play in, today's day and age in terms of, sometimes I scratch my head when I see a tight end going to an offense that doesn't utilize the tight end a whole lot, but they probably got a pretty big package, of paying them with revenue share and NIL and all that stuff. So that still kind of boggles my mind because, we always want these guys to, to have the goal of making NFL money, not necessarily focus so much on the NIL money.